What's going on, everybody? It is that time again. The Sooners Illustrated Podcast, episode 149 on this Thursday, January 30th, 2025. Josh Callaway, Collin Kennedy with you on a Thursday. Loaded recruiting show off of Junior Day weekend. Another big slew, a slate of visits coming up this weekend. Oklahoma got a big commitment this week. There's also some other recruiting questions that we have to talk about as well. Got the right guy here for it. And, of course, our recruiting insider, Collin Kennedy. We'll also look at the final 24/7 Sports Class of 2025 rankings update, a few Oklahoma signees with some big jumps there. We'll recap all the latest there. So a lot to get to on a Thursday in the world of recruiting, Collin. But let's start with the good news of the week. Oklahoma is back on the board in 2026. Once again, their fourth commit of the class with 2026 four-star wideout Daniel Odom. He jumped into the pot earlier this week. Odom from St. John Bosco High School out there in Bellflower, California. He is our number 41 wide receiver in the 2026 class, a composite just outside the top 150 players overall. Collin, talk about the player, how Oklahoma got him. Just paint a picture of all of it as Oklahoma gets their fourth commit, like I said, all on offense in 2026 with the wideout here in Daniel Odom.
Yeah, a little bit of a surprise too, if I'm quite honest with you. It's rare that a kid from the West Coast, St. John Bosco, nonetheless, a storied program out there, heads to a place like Oklahoma for just, by my count, his second time visiting, sees the place and says, you know what? I'm done. I think I'm good. And in this situation, that's exactly what happened with Daniel Odom. Now, I think that the important context here is that Odom had been building a relationship with Emmett Jones. The two of them had been kind of hitting it off as, again, they'd gotten to know each other further. But the name of the game here is Jaden O'Neal. Oklahoma's quarterback commit in 2026 has known Daniel Odom since they were kids. I believe they played youth football together, have gone to camps together, and have worked out, or whatever else. They spend a lot of time with each other. They're very familiar with each other on and off the field. And I think for Daniel Odom, first and foremost, like this guy was coveted by some heavy hitters. And I think that's a testament to what Jaden O'Neal, Emmett Jones were able to do. Odom was in kind of a top six mode with Oklahoma along the likes of Miami, Oregon, Tennessee, Texas, and Washington.
Yeah.
Really impressive list. But I think when Odom got to see the program further, learn a little bit more about Emmett Jones, his coaching approach and his coaching style, the future of the offense under Ben Arbuckle, and then just having that built-in trust with Jaden O'Neal and getting some assurances from a guy that he knows well. OU's able to get this one done relatively out of the blue, and the last point I would make is it's huge because we've talked about this here on the show. 2026 isn't necessarily seen as the most loaded cycle in terms of receiver talent. You kind of look up and down the board and say, where is OU and where are several other programs going to get their guys? Oklahoma gets a big one in Daniel Odom.
For sure. You read my mind. You know, we talked about that a little bit last week, you know, the wide receiver board in 2026. That was kind of one of the more intriguing positions for Oklahoma, you know, kind of coming up through the early part of the cycle of this year, this calendar year. And getting one early here with Daniel Odom. And, you know, again, it's very early. It's literally four guys, but good start in 2026 when you had Jaden O'Neal at the top, Daniel Odom, and then the tight end Ryder Mix. And then on the offensive line, Will Conroy. So it's like you got one at each level. And, you know, it's Ben Arbuckle's first offense, first class there. I mean, obviously, I know that especially in particular Mix and O'Neal were before Arbuckle was ever the OC, but it's still kind of his first group. And so it's, you know, it's a nice start. It's still very early. It's four guys. Like I said, we're a long way from sign day, but it's a nice start. It's exciting to look at the names on paper and say you kind of can see the pieces. And when you kind of look at that next wave as Oklahoma tries to get their offense back to where Oklahoma fans are used to it being.
Yeah, I think the first point that I want to follow up with is that the natural inclination from Oklahoma's fans probably going to say, look, talk to me whenever he signs in December because this is January.
Sure.
I don't want to not acknowledge the fact that getting the commitment is half the battle, pushing it across the finish line when you're talking about a 4-star receiver who was, again, being pursued by the likes of Oregon, UW, Texas, Tennessee, and several others. Like, I get that. But this is still a massive win for Oklahoma. And I think not only to get a receiver talent of this caliber, to get someone who knows one of the faces of your class very well into the mix quick.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a guarantee, obviously, but I also want to push back a little bit and say, Oklahoma fans, it's okay if you're excited about Daniel Odom because his familiarity with Jaden O'Neal is really going to give the Sooners a chance to secure his signing later down the line. And then I think the other thing, too, you kind of painted the picture about the 2026 class for Oklahoma, what it's forming early on. Not only is it very offensive forward, which at a time that the offense struggled in 2024, it's good to see that this staff is kind of finding some resurgence on the recruiting trail. I look at this group and I say, it's a class that has some guys at some big name programs who could help you build some further inroads on the recruiting trail. You're looking at Daniel Odom at St. John Bosco. Again, St. John Bosco, one of the best programs in America when we talk about high school football. Will Conroy moved to IMG Academy. Now you have an offensive lineman at IMG, Ryder Mix. We know how important Frisco Lone Star is and will be in 2026 specifically. I mean, the Lone Star Rangers are full of targets for OU in 2026. And then Jaden O'Neal at Narbonne. Narbonne has several other 2026 and talents beyond the class as well. And so you get someone like Daniel Odom, who we talk about receiver, we talk about the offensive success, a guy that can help you at a big name program, just like several others in your group. It's a pretty encouraging start for Oklahoma in 2026.
Absolutely. And it's kind of nice too. I don't know if there was ever that much concern about this, but when you have the year you just had offensively, there's a little bit of that. Like, is Oklahoma still going to be a destination for premier offensive players? At the high school level, obviously the Jaden O'Neal connection helps a lot, but still, it's nice just to kind of see right away 4-star wideout who had plenty of options that Collin just detailed. He chose Oklahoma, and that's a good feeling, and they continue to put that 26 crop together. So it's some nice fruits from the weekend coming out in right away there with Daniel Odom. We shift to kind of the rest of the weekend. We mentioned Jaden O'Neal. He was one of many, obviously, in town over the weekend for the Junior Day. We previewed that last week. For you, you've had a ton of VIP notes up on our website, Sooners Illustrated, Oklahoma247sports.com. Become a VIP member. We have a special coming up for signing day, so keep an eye out for that here coming up very, very soon the next week. But for you, some of the things that jumped out from the weekend, as it sounds like everything went well. These weekends typically do. But for you, I guess some of the feedback early out of the big Junior Day weekend.
Yeah, I think you have to start with some of the in-state guys, and Jaden O'Neal being the face of the class right now, really going to work on some of those premier players within the Sooner State borderlines. And I think when you look at the picture that Jaden posted with 4-star wide receiver Mason James out of Norman, 3-star running back Katie Jones up there in the Tulsa area at Jenks, like getting those two into the class is imperative for Oklahoma. And I think when you talk to people right now, I've talked to Mason James about this on several occasions, and I think I've talked about this on the podcast. Like, Mason James and Jaden O'Neal have really gotten to know each other. Jaden O'Neal, whenever you ask him for a couple of guys that he's targeting specifically who he really wants in this class, Mason James is one of, if not the first name out of his mouth on the recruiting trail. And I know that Mason is acknowledging that. And so those two spending a little bit more time together, I think that's important. Katie Jones continuing to feel the love from Oklahoma at a time where Tennessee's surging, Louisville is surging, some other programs are getting heavily involved. I think there's kind of this notion that Katie Jones is just going to be a Sooner. That's the caliber of talent at running back that's going to be coveted by several. I think he just dropped a top schools list. So you can kind of see his mind formulating around, okay, these are some premier destinations that I really want to evaluate. Oklahoma has to further its standing with him. And I think OU did that. One thing I talked about on our board too there were a couple of recruits committed to other programs that were in town out in Norman. Rylan Morris, the 4-star athlete, committed to Baylor. And then you've got Ryan Gilbert and Markel Ford, 2 defensive backs committed to Texas A&M. Let me start with Rylan Morris. This is one of my favorite recruits in the 26 cycle. I've seen this guy in several different competitive settings, and his competitive toughness, his competitive mindset, his versatility, not only from like an athletic ability or skill set standpoint, but whatever he's willing to do, he's willing to embrace any type of role to help his team. Like, I have seen Rylan Morris do some pretty impressive stuff. And I think that when you talk about DeMarco Murray, Ben Arbuckle, I know we talked about this on the show going into the weekend. Now showing Rylan Morris their reinvigorated interest in him. Coming out of the weekend, it's sounding more and more like Oklahoma and Rylan Morris getting an official visit on the books is in the cards. Now, nothing has been finalized, but just talking to some sources around Rylan, Oklahoma has really made it known, especially coming out of the weekend, that the Sooners want to get back involved with him. Baylor went and saw him almost immediately after he returned from Norman, so you can see that the Bears are maybe seeing a little bit of shifting going on. And then I was told that Stanford is really in the mix here. The Cardinal contacting Rylan Morris heavily. And so I kind of see that trio of schools now getting prepared to go after Rylan Morris pretty heavily in the summer. I think that this visit in OU opened Rylan Morris's eyes a little bit to just how much he's wanted out there. And maybe whatever happened this weekend kind of springboards this into a second recruitment. And then the 2 Texas A&M guys, I think Oklahoma hit it out of the park with both. I would say Markel Ford maybe more so than Ryan Gilbert. I think Ryan Gilbert, again, still committed to Texas A&M, as is Markel Ford. A&M recruiting them heavily, but Oklahoma involved. And I was told that a few other schools out there are hovering around Ryan Gilbert. Markel Ford, though, like, I give Brandon Hall a ton of credit here, as one normally does. He's pretty good at his job, but it feels like at this point, it feels like a year where Markel Ford has been committed to Texas A&M. And I know it's not exactly a year. It's probably been a few months, but
yeah,
throughout the entirety of that pledge, Brandon Hall, I've constantly heard about him staying in contact with Markel Ford, and that not only being recognized, but then furthering OU standing with Markel coming out of this visit. I'm not saying Oklahoma is primed for a potential flip here, but the Sooners are gaining a lot of momentum. Keep an eye on Markel Ford and Ryan Gilbert. I think Oklahoma is somewhere in kind of the top 3 to 4 as far as some schools hovering around him, even though he remains committed to Texas A&M. I could keep going. There's a laundry list. Valdon Sone is or Valdon Sound, I should say, defensive tackle. He had a great visit in Norman. We've talked about him a little bit. Oklahoma was just out to see him again today. So that by my count, Oklahoma has visited him in person twice and hosted him on campus over the last week or two. A lot of interest being shown there. Oklahoma offers several players: Jabari Brady, the 4-star wide receiver, Dejon Ackerson, the in-state linebacker, who we talked about. A couple other offers went out. In general, a really productive weekend, and no commits, but we talked about it. That wasn't necessarily the purpose of this weekend.
Sure.
Oklahoma covering some ground with a lot of guys, and I think all in all, a very successful exposure point for the program.
Absolutely. Big weekend for Oklahoma there. And like I said, Collin's had tons of content, intel, hearing from guys over on the website, Sooners Illustrated, Oklahoma.247sports.com. I suggest you become a VIP member. We're getting into the really Collin. This is his time right here. As we get into the spring and the summer, it's a lot of recruiting intel flowing all the time. Mike Roach has had a lot for us as of late as well. You get the whole network. So lots of recruiting content on the site as of late, and much more to come. You mentioned, or we talked a little bit earlier about Jaden O'Neal. He was in town for this, and like you said, putting in the work, talking to guys, getting people ready. I want to look ahead to the next weekend because it's a conversation that has come up as people are curious about it. So Bo Bentley quarterback in 2026 who you have talked about. You were ahead of this. A couple of weeks ago, he came up on the show. He's going to be in town this weekend. He got the offer officially from Oklahoma, whenever that was, a week or so ago. So naturally, the question here, Collin, that I know a lot of our VIP members have been asking, and a lot of OU fans are just in general curious about is what's the deal here? So you have Gene O'Neal committed. We've talked about a lot. He's really talented, putting in the work to bring other guys with them. Obviously, a friend of his, Daniel Odom, just came on board. But they're pursuing this guy, Bo Bentley, who's also very talented that you talked about. He grew up an OU fan. He's just down there in Texas at Salina. In our 24/7 Sports rankings, he's the number 11 QB in the class, so he's obviously very talented. Coincidentally, one spot in front of Jaden O'Neal is number 12 right now. Paint the picture for us. Could Oklahoma take both guys? Not necessarily. I guess just go through all of it from your view. What's kind of the story here with Oklahoma's quarterback pursuits in 2026? Would both guys come together even? Is that even a thing they would want to do?
Yeah, so to answer the first part of your question, yes, Oklahoma could take both. And quite honestly, I think Oklahoma would want to take both. Because let's kind of set the table here, okay? John Mateer is coming in to essentially be the face of the program. He has 2 seasons of eligibility remaining, if I remember correctly. However, he technically would be draft eligible following the 2025 season, which means if Mateer puts together another phenomenal season under Ben Arbuckle, which feels very much like the case could be, Mateer could leave and Oklahoma would be starting completely from scratch at quarterback again. And as of right now, you look around that room, you say, okay, they take the Western Carolina quarterback. That was a depth addition. They take Jet New on the recruiting trail late. Jet New, you never want to count your chickens before they hatch out of the egg when it comes to quarterback recruiting, right? So maybe Jet New in a year says, Jaden O'Neal is coming in. There's a quarterback already in the room with some experience. John Mateer could be back again. This Bo Bentley situation, maybe there's not a clear path to playing time for me, and maybe he explores options in the portal. I don't know. These are a lot of hypotheticals, but you have to play that game when you talk about the quarterback position. The long and short of it is, in a year's time, Oklahoma could pretty much be turning to whoever the freshmen are in this room to compete for the starting job. That's a real possibility.
Yeah.
And in the case of not only Jaden O'Neal, but Bo Bentley, you really want to have that caliber of talent ready to go if they're going to be asked to compete straight away. And so, again, the first part of the question, Oklahoma could, and I personally believe they would take both of these quarterbacks and allow them to figure the situation out and basically say, hey, best man wins. But that's thinking way down the line, because I think the second part of this question is, would they be willing to come into this quarterback class together? Because I think, again, there's kind of this notion out there that Bo Bentley grew up a huge Oklahoma fan. We've written about this on several occasions on the site. I've talked about this frequently. That's the dream offer. This is the dream program for Bo. But at the same time, as I've kind of touched on a little bit, it's like Bo has opened his eyes to other possibilities because he didn't get that Oklahoma offer for quite a while. Other programs have gotten into the mix. And quite frankly, he's had a little bit of a chip on his shoulder because he wanted that Oklahoma offer, right? I mean, this is a guy at the quarterback position people compare to John Mateer or Baker Mayfield. So he has that kind of personality about him. He's a competitor. I think you see what can happen here with Bo, but then there's Jaden's case. And Jaden has been through a lot already in his Oklahoma pledge, right? I mean, you're talking about someone who committed to the program, a completely different offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach. That guy's gone, a new guy's come in. They've gotten to know each other. The team struggles. O'Neal holds strong the whole way through. Now that new offensive coordinator that he has pretty much reaffirmed his commitment to offers another quarterback. And quite frankly, I think Ben Arbuckle did the right thing. I love this move by Ben Arbuckle because he comes in and he sees a guy like Bo Bentley and says, this is someone we really got to let have a shot. I don't know what Jaden thinks. I don't know how he's seeing all of this. And Jaden's a professional. He's going to make sure that no one in the public realm knows how he feels personally. But I think the beauty of this situation is that it's not out of the question because Jaden O'Neal is a competitor. Bo Bentley is a competitor. They both have a lot of love for the program, clearly. And I think that's why OU is going after both. When you're talking about one quarterback who's been willing to ride or die with you from the beginning and another quarterback who has dreamed of putting on your uniform, there are worse players and prospects to go after in this kind of situation, right? And so I don't know that there's a right answer. I don't know that there's a wrong answer, but I don't know that there is a clear path that needs to be taken. In my opinion, you see how this thing plays out if you're the Sooner staff. You see what you can do. You see who you end up with. And as long as you get one, you're set. You get both, dream scenario. It's hard to say exactly on the recruit front how they perceive all of this because it's so fresh. And Bo Bentley is going to be in campus this weekend. We'll probably learn more about all of this coming out of Saturday. But in general, I love the move personally to go after both of these players. I think very highly of them both. And as long as Oklahoma can ensure they can get at least one, maybe the two, it would be huge for OU. It would be huge for the future of the program. And I think, quite frankly, it'd be really exciting for each of these players.
It's really interesting, obviously, and a delicate tightrope Oklahoma has to walk. Obviously, it's worth mentioning Jaden O'Neal is aware of kind of the conversation. I wanted to bring it up. He tweeted a couple of days ago, I'll read it. What's understood doesn't have to be explained, the present and the future. And it was a picture of him and John Mateer. Kind of was his way of letting everyone know, like, I'm not going anywhere, or at least publicly, right? That's the company line, his public sentiment. Of course, he then, just a couple of days or a day later, I think, put out that he got an offer from Georgia, which is kind of also, I felt like a little bit of like I could go wherever I want. Jaden O'Neal's a really good player. We talk about that. From Oklahoma's perspective, if you could take both guys, that's a no-brainer if you're Oklahoma. If from the OU angle, you get both guys, obviously you just doubled your chance of hitting on one of them. It's obvious, right? If you get both guys in here, they're both good with it, they're going to compete for it, you get the better of the two, in theory. So that's a no-brainer from Oklahoma's end. But, from the player end, that's where it's interesting. You would think that if Bo Bentley is even entertaining Oklahoma, he's good with it because they already have Jaden O'Neal in-house. But how does O'Neal feel about it? When he's been around for so long, he's been committed, and like you said, stuck with OU through the coordinator change, is helping put other recruits together in this class. Does he feel a little slighted by that? That only he could tell you, So it's interesting. It's interesting, and it's a delicate balance because you don't really have to worry about this at any other position because quarterback's the only one where you typically only take one. And so you get in this spot and it's like you have two guys who both want to come to you and they're both really good. Yeah, you could probably take both, but it's also like one of those things where you could mess up and get neither sort of a thing if you play wrong, right? So
I hope that neither player takes it as a slight because to me, I think it's the utmost compliment because again, to paint the picture, Oklahoma will face a pivotal juncture in the future of the program if and when Mateer heads to the NFL. For Oklahoma to basically say, look, and this is probably the pitch, we want both you guys to come in, compete at this program that you both adore, battle it out. One of you might win, and worst comes to worst, and this is crazy enough, part of the recruiting process for quarterbacks these days. If one of you wins, you guys will still have your entire future ahead of you in the portal or whatever else. And you mentioned, I think Jaden O'Neal is a heck of a football player. I think Bo Bentley has been worthy of this offer for a while. Mm-hmm. I've written about what Bo Bentley has accomplished in the state of Texas, and Jaden O'Neal in his own right has been really darn good in the state of California, another high-level state for high school football, when he's been allowed to play, which, again, is just
Yeah.
I think that's also kind of a testament to O'Neal's talent as well. And so I think that this is going to be really fun to follow. And I personally have a lot of respect, and I'm a big fan of both of these individuals. And I hope that they see the opportunity here. And I hope that maybe some tension can kind of be put off to the side, if there is any, to kind of understand the bigger picture, and that Oklahoma appreciates both players for who they are.
It's a good problem to have for Oklahoma, two really talented quarterbacks that
Certainly.
You got to figure it out. I think I speak for everyone. How great would it be if both these guys could both be at Brent Venables' camp this summer? Maybe could see them side by side, both throwing around the bean a little bit. I wouldn't hate it.
I mean, even if they're not at the exact same camp, just to see those two cycle through campus and watching them toss. Because again, folks, if you need a reminder, like, I highly encourage you to go check out some tape of both of these guys. Because, dude, whether it's t-shirts and shorts or full pads on, these guys can play.
Yeah, no, Jaden O'Neal, that was when he burst on for me personally, because it was, okay, that guy is a freak. As far as this weekend, I mentioned Bo Bentley's going to be in town this weekend. Some other football guys that you're watching that'll be in town here in the next couple of days. There is a basketball visitor, too, that we'll talk about in a second. But on the football side first, anything in addition to Bo Bentley that's worth noting for you coming up this weekend?
Yeah, so let's start with Bo. He is going to come in, I believe, on Saturday, and I was told it's pretty much going to be a little bit more of like an informal visit. Oklahoma was going to have potentially like a full secondary junior day this Saturday. I think that's been scaled down. I think that they are only welcoming in a couple of individuals to campus to spend some quality time and work through some things with those recruits, and Bo is one of them. As far as this visit weekend specifically, this is going to pretty much determine how the next few months go. I know that might be a little bit hyperbolic in nature, but like, you have to assume that Bo Bentley, being one of, if not potentially the only recruit on campus this weekend, he's going to have some very meaningful conversations with OU staff. That's Ben Arbuckle, that's Brent Venables, that's whoever else, John Kusecki maybe.
Yeah.
We talk about this whole dynamic that's forming. Well, at some point, the program and the player has to actually work through it. And it feels like for the first time, we're really going to start the figuring out process of this situation. So Bo, I know Bo is really looking forward to it. I talked to him in San Antonio before the offer came through, just kind of talked to some folks around him. I think he's excited to see what OU has to say, and he's excited to sort of share his personal sentiment on everything. And for lack of a better term, we're going to get an answer about whether or not OU actually even has a shot for any of this to be a thing.
Yeah.
So keep an eye on that. And then the other guy I want to mention quickly, I hope I get this name right. I haven't gotten the firm pronunciation, but Emmanuel Iheanacho out of Maryland. He's at Georgetown Prep School. He is the number 5 player in America for us at 24/7 Sports in the 2026 class. Number 2 offensive tackle in the country. 6'6.5", 345 pounds. So in other words, we're talking about someone who can pretty much just now drive a car, who's much bigger than like Trent Williams. I can't wrap my head around it.
Silly.
Emmanuel Iheanacho is one of the most coveted players in the country. I know Oregon just went out there to see him. I think he just visited Georgia, maybe. Last night or the night before, he stopped by Maryland out of the blue. Mike Loxley was taking him to a basketball game there in Maryland, and he was on schedule to be in Norman this weekend. I think that's still the case, but working to confirm that because there have been some change of plans for some guys out there. But he had put on the record publicly that he would be in town this Saturday. So Emmanuel Iheanacho scheduled to be in Norman, and Bill Bedenbaugh getting Oklahoma's foot in the door with one of the top recruits in the country. Obviously, we're getting ready to talk about an offensive tackle that's pretty good, who's headed to Norman officially as a player. But there's no slowing down in terms of offensive line recruiting. And so curious to see what comes from Emmanuel Iheanacho's visit to OU, if and when it happens, because as all of these big name programs throw their hat in the ring, the Sooners, it feels like we're going to get a sense of how much he values OU as a potential destination. Curious to see what comes from this.
100%. Like I said, with last weekend, keep up with Sooners Illustrated, Oklahoma247sports.com. Collin with more of the updates there coming up through the weekend. I teased a little bit, but we don't do a ton of basketball recruiting on the show. We do some here and there as it comes available to us, I guess. We do have one we want to note this weekend with a visitor that you just reported right as we started to record the show. Cameron Lomax. He's a combo guard from Heritage High School down by you there in Frisco. He's a 3-star guard, top 150 player. He's going to be in town on the basketball side this weekend. Porter Moser's team has a home game against Vanderbilt on Saturday afternoon. Obviously a big game that Oklahoma needs. What can you tell us there with Cameron Lomax in that 2026 class? Something that I feel like has gone relatively overlooked in Porter Moser's tenure because they haven't made the tournament and all that, is that he has recruited incredibly well. He has found a way to land. Obviously, in 25, you got Kai Rogers and Alec Blair. They've been able to get pretty darn good talent in relative to the Lloyd Noble Center and the success or whatever things you want to put on it on that side of it. What about Cameron Lomax, and what should you fans be looking forward to with him?
Yeah, if you need an incentive to show up at the Lloyd Noble Center on Saturday afternoon, you might see Cameron Lomax, Bo Bentley, Emmanuel Iheanacho roaming the floor a little bit, because I know that sometimes the football program likes to take their visitors over to watch the basketball game, and that's a common theme for a lot of programs. But again, Oklahoma facing a top 25 Vanderbilt team, that's incentive enough. But a couple key visitors, including Cameron Lomax. I really like this guy. I got to talk to him for a little bit earlier this week. I waited to report his visit publicly for a few days just so we could get closer to this game. But Cam Lomax is a really impressive player. Not the biggest guy in the world. I believe he's 6 foot tall, maybe 170 pounds. But he averaged more than 25 points per game as a sophomore. I think right now he's averaging more than 22 points per game with like 4 rebounds and around 4 assists. So really productive player at Frisco Heritage, which from my understanding is a pretty quality program in terms of Texas high school basketball right now. Yeah. And Cam is being coveted by several programs. I know that this visit was part of a pretty busy recent schedule for him. He visited Texas A&M last week. He was on campus with the Aggies and actually got that offer from Texas A&M while visiting, to my understanding. He had a visit to Texas Tech planned for that following weekend. I haven't been able to confirm whether or not he was actually in Lubbock, but Texas Tech has been interested. Texas has been interested. TCU has been interested. Then you have Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Memphis, LSU, Oklahoma State, SMU, and a few others officially in the mix. Yeah, this guy's being coveted by a lot of regional brands, and it sounds like Oklahoma. Cam was telling me that OU is probably one of the most consistent figures in his recruitment to date. So he's excited to get out, sit down with the staff, work through the aspects of the program and the campus. And then, again, he'll watch Oklahoma take on number 24 Vanderbilt this weekend. So I'm excited to talk to Cam out of the trip. We should have that interview for Oklahoma fans at SoonersIllustrated.com, and an important recruit-specific visitor because, like you mentioned, Porter Moser, and I give a ton of credit to this OU basketball staff, they've recruited at a high level. Yeah. Maybe Cam Lomax is their next big project, and he'll see all of that this weekend.
Yeah, it just feels like, too, and they've done that with, obviously, the frustration of the lack of tournament bids. It's like if they could get into the tournament and really start to get some momentum, like what could they do with momentum? They've been doing this with kind of a lack of momentum. And you kind of look at this year with what Dayton Forsythe has done as a freshman, obviously Jeremiah Fears. It encourages you, and obviously the two guys coming in who I mentioned earlier, like you got to get the ball rolling a little bit. You could really have something, but you got to, it's like get over that hump is kind of been what's waiting for that program. So a big visitor there, though, that we'll be keeping an eye on this weekend. Before I let you go, do want to talk about last thing The final 24/7 Sports rankings update for 2025. Signing day is next week. Obviously, it's not going to have the hoopla of the December signing day. Oklahoma does not expect to sign anybody new. But we did get the final rankings update. I want to talk about a few guys that obviously are placed in the top 247 here at 24/7 Sports. We'll start with the headliner, Michael Fasusi. Collin, obviously, number one offensive tackle in the class officially. Top 10 player, 5-star. Really exciting and cool that, for a guy who we all know is really talented to kind of have something concrete to look at on the screen. Number one tackle in the class. That's a good feeling if you're Oklahoma, I would imagine, to have that guy signed in for this class.
Yeah, the headline here for Michael Fasusi is obviously he is now officially the number one offensive tackle in the 2025 class at 24/7 Sports. But where I really wanted to hammer home the value of this ranking, not only is he now the number one offensive tackle for 24/7 Sports, this was a historic cycle for offensive line talent specifically. For the first time ever at 24/7 Sports, which started ranking players in 2011, I believe, for the first time ever, a record 9 offensive linemen finished in 5-star territory. 9 offensive linemen.
Crazy.
8 of them were offensive tackles. 1 was an interior projection. And you could make the argument that maybe 1 or 2 further offensive linemen could have had a case to be in that 5-star range. And so not only is Michael Fasusi now officially the number one offensive tackle in the class, he's the number one offensive tackle in a historic cycle for offensive tackles, which is a testament to his talent, his traits, and his overall bright future ahead. We've talked about it a number of times. Michael Fasusi, one of the most naturally gifted prospects you will find in America right now. Ridiculous wingspan, the highest vertical jump of any player in the class above 280 pounds, impressive foot speed and quickness, the soccer background, the track and field profile. He's efficient in the run game, which you rarely see for players of kind of his full profile. He's got every trait you need to become an elite pass protector. All that and more. But then you factor in the fact that Michael Fasusi is as high character of an individual as you will find in this class, as coachable a player as you will see. Oklahoma was always going to be judged by its offensive line haul in 2025. And for Bill Bedenbaugh and OU to close it out with not only the number one offensive tackle in America, but the number one offensive tackle among some elite players at that position. What an incredible building block and foundational piece the Sooners have. It's not only something that Michael Fasusi should take a lot of pride in, it's something that Bill Bedenbaugh and Oklahoma's fan base should be really excited about as well.
Sticking on that offensive line, also in the top 247 is Ryan Fojay. It always felt like, we've talked about it a million times, that Ryan has gone a bit overlooked because of Michael Fasusi. It's going to happen when you have the number one offensive tackle in the class. But Ryan, number 70 overall player, like you said, a loaded offensive tackle class, offensive line class. But he's in the top 70 overall players. He's a 4-star prospect, was where he finishes up. We've heard nothing but good things. We talked about him many times, and he places inside the top 70. Collin, I mean, it kind of feels like, I could be way off, but it kind of feels like the reverse of this previous cycle with David Stone and Jaden Jackson. Like, all the attention on David Stone, and fairly so. Fairly sure. But Jaden Jackson was kind of also right there. It was like, this guy's also really good. And then obviously look at the freshman season he had. Ryan Fojay, obviously you know him far better than me. In the top 70, he lands as a 4-star and top, just outside the top 10 tackles in the class. Obviously, a really, really talented player that Oklahoma's excited to have.
Yeah, I like that comparison a lot. The David Stone, Jaden Jackson dynamic compared to Michael Fasusi and Ryan Fojay. And I think it's interesting. Michael Fasusi is going to command all of this attention, and rightfully so. Takes the number one offensive tackle spot, but he took like a 5-spot jump because Michael Fasusi is a known commodity. I mean, we've known how special he is.
Right.
Why I'm really excited for Ryan Fojay is this is a player who Oklahoma stamped early, being the first to offer. Bill Bedenbaugh kind of placed that faith in Foj first, and it paid off. This is also a recruit that 24/7 Sports specifically really kind of stood on the table for. Our network, our guys atop the scouting team said, there's something here in Ryan Foj, and consistently the network had Ryan atop rankings that maybe were a little bit unprecedented. Ryan Foj closes out the cycle going up 17 spots from number 87 all the way up to 70, and number 13 offensive tackle across the country at a time, again, like you mentioned, where this was arguably the best offensive tackle recruiting cycle we've seen in years.
Yeah.
Foj is a special talent, folks. This is the kind of offensive tackle other programs would kill to have in their class, to be their featured offensive tackle recruit. The fact that he's kind of secondary in nature to Fasusi is a testament to the job that Bill Bedenbaugh did here. It's the work that Ryan Foj did, because, again, this is a player who just jumped up 17 spots to climb into the top 70. He didn't start playing football until high school. He's only been playing this game for about 4 years now. And so very proud of Ryan. It was really cool to see him show out at the Navy All-American Bowl at both tackle and guard. I think this is a player that we've also talked about in similar fashion of Fasusi, and saying this is someone you can build with into the future for your offensive line. There is an argument to make right now that Ryan Foj might even be a little bit more day one ready as a guard or tackle to help Oklahoma straight away.
Yeah.
And I think that this jump in the rankings is reflective of that. This is a really impressive prospect, and it's something that is well earned for Ryan Foj.
Last one, flipping over to defense. Tristan Haynes saw a really big jump that you can articulate better than me. Had a great week at the All-American Bowl. Number one player in Oklahoma officially. How about landing number 100 exactly? Really cool. I mean, it doesn't mean anything really, but he'd rather be number 100 than number 101. You want to be in the top 100, so pretty darn cool there. Obviously, Carl Albert High School right down the road, local guy. He lands inside the top 100, four-star cornerback. We've heard over and over the elite athleticism for Tristan. I mentioned before, Carl Albert High School is so much better than everyone. It's hard to really tell on a game-to-game. It was really encouraging and exciting to hear that things went so well for him in San Antonio against other elite competition, other elite athletes. Collin, talk about Tristan and kind of the rise that he's had, and I don't know the right way to put it. It's like he's not overlooked. It's almost like we almost have taken it for granted because he's been in the boat so long. He's right down the road. Like, this is an elite prospect, top 100 player right down the road, and he's going to Oklahoma.
One of the most seismic rises in the rankings update in general. I mean, Josh, he goes from 201 all the way to the top 100. That's a 101 spot jump for Tristan Haynes. And I think maybe the best way to describe what you're talking about, Tristan Haynes was probably someone that always was in the center of cautious optimism. I'll put it that way. Like, you looked at a corner who was a three-phase playmaker, right? Offense, defense, special teams, every bit of 6'1" to 6'2", long-armed, really promising frame. The tape checks out. The athleticism markers are clear. But you always, like you mentioned, had that wonder of, how would Tristan Haynes fare against some of the other nation's elite, considering Carl Albert just simply dominates everyone that they play? And that's not Tristan Haynes' fault.
Sure.
It was always just about, dude, this is the kind of recruit that we would tout anywhere in the country. 24/7 Sports was like, we really hope that consistently ranking him high is going to pay off. And I think Haynes delivered and then some, because like I mentioned, that week in San Antonio, he had between the scrimmage between the two squads and then the actual game itself, he had 3 pass breakups, made some really nice plays on the ball, had punt return yardage. He measured in well at check-in, and so the frame is verified now to be as promising as we thought. And Haynes is, again, the kind of player, too, that you're going to bet on when you're ranking towards the NFL draft, because he has every athletic trait measurable, the three-phase playmaking ability, the multi-sport background. It's all there. But Tristan Haynes is one of the most high-character individuals that you will find. He's that quiet, nice, like always just kind interaction type of player that you will find in
Yeah.
That's part of the evaluation process. And so it all combines for Tristan Haynes to jump more than 100 spots
It's
to
crazy.
close out the cycle. And I think a lot of Oklahoma fans should be really proud of Tristan, because not only does he kind of put on for the Sooner State and earn that ranking, for this guy to now be named the number one player in the state of Oklahoma, it's the player and individual who's certainly deserving of being kind of the face of Oklahoma football.
Absolutely. So congrats to those three guys. Obviously, all with big jumps, all inside the top 100 of the final 2025 rankings. Again, signing day is next Wednesday. We'll have some coverage there. Again, Oakland's not expected to sign anybody new, but it does kind of put the bow on the 2025 class, the finality of it, as we kind of wrap up that cycle and really look ahead to the next one in 2026. And we can kind of wrap it up a little bit on the show next week. I think that's it for now. We're back on Monday with James and Tom, recapping the weekends that were for basketball, continue our football position stash sports series. Also, the Diamond Sports are coming. So we're going to have some softball and baseball talk here coming up very, very soon as those sports seasons start in the next week or two, which is crazy. It always kind of sneaks up. So look out for more coverage and talk there. CK, we're back with you next Thursday. Again, wrapping up sign day and whatever else is going on, the big visit weekend for a couple of these guys, like we said. And we'll whatever there is to talk about. There always is a lot, and we'll do it next week.
Yeah, I just want to mention before we get out of here, obviously we did not talk defensive coordinator because I think we are just like many of you out there in the fan base. They just need to make a damn hire. And we heard a lot of you guys loud and clear in the comments section. We just kind of figured going into the show that the defensive coordinator talk was a little bit dead. And so hopefully it's nice to have a little bit of a different storyline or two to track. And I just want to say as we get out of here, I was out at a coaching convention this past weekend, hit a couple of camps. It's nice to have high school recruiting back, man. And I know signing day is going to be a little bit dead, but maybe we get into another draft. I know those are usually popular. I would love to hear, in the same way we didn't talk defensive coordinator because we heard all of you in the comments, anything that you guys would be curious to hear about as far as signing day next week, hop down in the comments below and let us know, because I would like to see personally what Sooner fans are kind of clamoring for, because I just love the fact we get to talk high school recruiting again, man. It's nice to have some of this stuff back.
Absolutely. Like you said, defensive coordinator, just hire someone for the love of
God. Make
God.
a hire. They took the shot. Make the hire, man.
It's been over a month since Zach Alley left. We will talk about the new DC whenever it happens. It may just never happen. They may just not. It may just be an open spot for all eternity at this point. They will make a hire at some point, I assume, and we'll talk about it when it happens. But until then, we're on to other things. All right, that's it for now. Back on Monday with Tom and James. Call me back on the show next Thursday, as always. For Collin Kennedy, I'm Josh Callaway signing off for now. We'll see you next time right back here on the Sooners Illustrated podcast.